Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for a new Film Fanatic video. It is November 22nd, Saturday, 11:37. Hope everyone's doing good. Pretty cold November day, getting really close to Turkey Day. So yeah, this is going to be another music show. This is a little bit of a special, I guess, specialty show for what it is. Um, Last night I had a show with Osmia, and which is a band I've been playing with. I've been really loving playing with these guys. They're just awesome dudes, and the music is super fun. And I'd been a fan of theirs for a few years before through a series of different circumstances where I was able to become a member of the band, and we've had a lot of shows this year, and it's been super awesome. And we just also finished a recording our first album, which will be out sometime next year. We finished recording the new album last week. I think it was last Wednesday. Not this past Wednesday, the Wednesday before. So we finished that, and we've been playing a lot of shows this year, which has been super fun. We we did a couple of tours this year, which was a blast, and we're actually planning on another tour coming up in the late winter, springtime of 2026 already. So it's been a really great year as far as this band goes. And so we played a show last night up in Brewer, and it's we're kind of going on a little bit of a break. Our next show isn't until February, so we're taking a little bit of a break as a band, and and one of the coolest things about this whole kind of journey, again for me, just personally, like I still play in a few other bands. Like I play, you know, the bands I guess I mainly play with are Osmia, and then my band Quantum, and then another band called Bookhead Sweet Tooth that I've played a lot with, and we did a tour also this past summer, and then the summer before we did a bigger tour. So it's been really fun. I've been really enjoying doing the touring thing. It had been quite a few years since I did anything like that, and it's been a super fun thing. And then aside from those three bands, I was this summer playing a lot with a local band called the Midnight Riders. I was kind of filling in with them for quite a while. I played quite a few shows with them this year, and then occasionally I still do, like, those three bands are probably the main bands for the most part, I guess. And then I still do like pickup gigs. I was playing like the Midnight Riders, and we had a pretty good amount of gigs. And then I do a few other, there's been a few other shows or gigs where I'll do like a fill-in thing, or maybe it might be a last minute call, or what have you. And but one of the coolest things about playing with Osmia is that we've been on lots of bills where or where we are on a bill where we share the whole night with a bunch of bands. And Leo, who's kind of the brainchild of the band, he is really really good about putting together shows, and he's really good about networking, because really, in the music industry and kind of the underground kind of music scene, it's it's you can do a lot of things yourself, and you can be really independent, which is great. But you really do, when you want to kind of branch out and try new things, you do have to really work with other people. There's only so much you can do by yourself. So, and he is kind of an ace at networking and all of these things. So this past year, uh, that's been one of the coolest experiences. Is just getting to see and meet so many great bands, from all over the country, and it's really inspiring. And then a lot of the times too, where we've met and played with bands with kids, essentially, like some of these guys have been in their early 20s maybe even younger, and they really kind of have their shit together, and it's really inspiring. So, and I've gotten turned on to so much cool music since we've been playing gigs. That's been one of the funnest parts, and that's like even that is more kind of in step with just my love of being a fan of music. So really really cool. But last night we had a show in Old Town, and it was kind of our last show for a while until like I said before, it's going to be we won't be playing any gigs for quite a while. And we just recorded this album, so that's going to slowly get fixed, or not fixed but mastered and mixed and all those things, which takes a lot of time. But last night's show was a kind of one for the record books. It was a very memorable show for a lot of kind of strange reasons. So I wanted to do a show on just the experience that we had last night as a band. It's been for the most part, all of our shows have been really fun, and even when we've gone on tour, because touring can be. I've had experiences with touring where it is not so great. It's not a lot of fun, and it can be really hard, and it's kind of a grind. Um, but luckily, things have been really good on that front. So anyway, this show that we had last night was booked fairly recently. I think just within like the last month or so. And it was in Old Town. And basically it was a house show. As a band with Osmia, we've never. This was our first time playing a house party. House party gigs can be really really fun. I've done quite a few house party gigs in the past, and then had some of my fun most some of my best memories of doing house party gigs were we did about three or four of them with Quantum, and a lot of the times with house party gigs, at least in my experience, you kind of someone has their apartment or a house, and they you know in my past experiences, like we would go there, and there'd be like say four or five bands on the bill, and basically it's total DIY, total like a total punk thing, and you basically they clear out some furniture, maybe put up some lights or sound system, and you basically essentially set up in someone's garage, or in a lot of cases that I've experienced, where you set up in their living room, and then you just play, and then the bands play a set. Each band plays a set. So this time last night, the bill of the bands, again. That's one of the things that I've loved so much about this year, is not knowing about any of the bands. I love to go into it cold and not like check out any of the bands on online, because I'm even more surprised and sometimes blown away by that. And last night was one of those times. On the bill was Militia, another band called the Gerrymanderers. And then we played Osmia, and then the headliners of some of the folks in this band were the people putting on this party called the Widows Club. So, and some of these guys in Widows Club were part of another band, Gunshot Glitter, who is a band that we've played with a few times, and they're based out of the Bangor Brewer Old Town area. And they're all like young, super young kids, but they're all like probably in their early 20s the most, and they are pretty phenomenal. Like these kids are just really inspiring. And it was a trip. So anyway, they put together this show, and they asked us if we could do it, and we said, yeah, we can do it. We'll do it. We'll make it happen. So I picked up Leo because his car, he had totaled his car after hitting a deer about a month ago, and so he's getting a new car now. But so I picked him up, And we drove up to Old Town Brewer area, and it was about an hour and 11 minutes or so, not too far. Bangor, it's just above Bangor, and Bangor is about an hour from here. So we got up there. We got to the house, found the address, and and it was a fairly big house. This place. It was like it had a big front kind of porch, and then you walk in, and then there was the actual house, and then it had this big kind of basement back area. And so we got there and we saw all of these people kind of walking into the back area, and we assumed, oh, that's probably the venue. So we get Leo and I, grab a couple of things, and we walk, and we were there kind of early. The show was supposed to start at like 7 o'clock, and we got there, about 6, and load-in was about 6. So we got there about 6 o'clock, and we grabbed our stuff and walked in the back, and we saw some people in that little doorway, and it was like a tiny little kind of stairwell. Um, and we're sitting there talking to a couple of people there, and who were hosting it, and they were like, yeah, you can load stuff in here, but I was like, where is the venue? Like, I don't see it, because it was just like an open, a really tiny room, and there were just a few people hanging out, and it was way in the back of the building. So one of the people who was hosting the show, this girl who plays in a Widows Club, whose house it was, lifted up this. It looked like a trap door, and it was like lifted up this giant kind of trap door thing, and suddenly there was this big giant kind of staircase, and I was just like, what? It was pretty trippy. It looked like a trap door, and and it had a set of stairs that were like going all the way into the basement, and the stairs were super, well, kind of dangerous. It was not. Luckily, most of the show, most of our equipment or whatnot, were everything was backlined, so there was a lot of equipment, you know, that they had for the bands. We still had to bring amps in and stuff, but the staircase was treacherous and kind of horrendous. So, but we got down there, we started loading stuff in, and I walked into the venue, and we got all the way downstairs, and I was like kind of blown away by this place. It was like this total bunker. And it probably held maybe 70, 80 people at the most, maybe 100. Um, and they had this really cool stage. They had a nice light setup. They had a full PA. They had all the drums provided, and it was awesome. Like they had it all decorated. They had all these cool kind of art pieces on the walls. It looked awesome. And then on the side of the stage, they had this bigger room where you could store all of your equipment. And I knew like that I didn't know anything about the bands that were playing, and I knew the only thing I didn't know was that we were going to go on second with Osmia, and each band was going to be playing, and there were 4 bands total. Each band was going to be playing like a 35-minute set. So we got there, and we loaded our stuff in. I had brought some food and just kind of relaxing and chilling out for a while, and had a beer, and we ate, I had some food, and then the first band that came up, the first band that played was Militia, and they did the sound check, and it was funny as hell and great at the same time. They sound checked with playing. They started playing these two like old school Iron Maiden songs, and I was just like, what? And these kids were like maybe 20, 21, and they were total like metalhead kids. Like they all had Iron Maiden t-shirts on and super long hair, and I was like, this is great. Like I have no idea what's going to happen. And they sound checked with like doing these two old school Iron Maiden songs, and growing up, Iron Maiden was one of my favorite metal bands. I still love Iron Maiden, and so it was a trip. And then they did a sound check. The sound, was pretty good. And then at that point there weren't a lot of people there. There was just like the bands were showing up, and then a few other people were there. There was a guy that was there who was a photographer who I guess works is part of the kind of the music scene up there because there's a big music scene. There's a shit ton of bands, all young kids playing all original music. Pretty inspiring. So there were just a few people kind of milling about, and then somebody said, "Well, the show's not actually starting to 7:30," so it was like, okay. So there was more time, like a half hour, to kind of So we were hanging out there for about an hour and a half, and sometimes I have a problem with showing up too early to gigs, just because I like to kind of get situated early and not have to like race and rush around. But we had time, and we kind of just relaxed, and then about 7:25, it was getting closer to 7:30. Suddenly, all these people showed up, a lot of young kids, and Orono is right there, Old Town, and Bangor, and it's kind of a college town, so there were like a lot of college kids there, and people all in their like early 20s, I would say, and then there were a few older people, but not really. And suddenly, around like 7:30, the whole place like filled up, and there was a ton of people there, and I was like, oh wow, okay, cool. And we luckily secured this little spot where we could sit, which was on this couch, which was the only place you could sit in the whole venue. And the first band that played was this band called Militia, and they were like a total straight up old school thrash metal band. And they were kind of fantastic. I was kind of blown away by them. And they played a really great set. They played like one or two covers, but mostly they played all original tunes. So it was a trip, and I was just like, this is music that I grew up on. When it comes to extreme music, extreme metal, thrash metal was like my first love, and then which led me getting I got into from that point into death metal and then black metal, and the rest is for what it is, history. But I still love that old school thrash, and these guys were totally straight up old school thrash, and I was just like, this is amazing, and they were really good. I was really impressed, and they played for about 35 minutes or so. The crowd was definitely like into the music. Everybody was drinking, and everybody brought alcohol, so there was a lot of alcohol there, a lot of beer. But the mood was great. People seemed really cool, and Militia was great. And then so they finished up their set, and then we were supposed to go on next. So and we were sharing a drum set. So I don't know. We took us about 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe to get all set up. Changing over with amps and stuff like that. And then I remember talking to the drummer of Militia, and he was probably like maybe 21, 22. And I was like, what the hell? Like, how you guys were great. And I said, like, I grew up listening to this music, and I'm like, just thinking in my head, like, how the hell, do these kids like discover this music, this like, the classic thrash metal that came out in the 80s and 90s, and they're totally awesome. And I'm like, it just blew my mind. And I remember saying to the drummer, like, this is music, I love this music, and I grew up on this, music. So it was such a part of my youth. And I said to them, I said to him, like, um, I haven't like listened to as much thrash metal as I don't listen to it as much, but I still have a love for it. And I said, you guys are going to make me start listening to thrash metal all over again. It was pretty funny. So we got set up, 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes or so later. And then we played our set, and it felt like things were going pretty good, and felt like we played a really good set, and it was pretty tight, and the sound was really good. People seemed to be into it. And it was wild because it was, going from like straight up thrash metal to like kind of shoegaze rock. It was like, wow, I wonder how people are going to react. And I had no idea what the other bands sounded like either. So it was like really awesome that there was such a variety of music. So we got done playing our set, and things went pretty well. We played for about 35 minutes or so, and then we got done, taking our stuff down from the stage, and then I went outside for a smoker and grabbed a beer or something, and then came back inside, and then the other band was starting to set up, and that was going to be the fourth band or the third band of the night. So, and they were called the the third band of the night, the Gerrymanderers. They were on up after us, and some of these guys that were in this band were part of Gunshot Glitter and a couple other little things of other bands that we had played with. So we kind of knew some of those guys, and they're all like wicked cool guys, super talented kids. So they got situated, the Gerrymanderers, and we were kind of hanging out, and people between the breaks between the bands, a lot of the people would take a break and go outside or go to the other room, and then once the music would start, then they come back in. So they were about to set off and start their set, and then the every all the folks came back in, and they started their first song, and it was great. They sounded really awesome, and again, it was a totally different kind of music. It was like acousticy, folky, indie rock kind of stuff. Totally different kind of a vibe. And they were playing their first song, and they sounded great. The sound was really good, and I was standing kind of in the on the side of the stage, and I just happened to like look over, and I saw like a couple of like beer cans on the floor, and I saw that it looked like somebody had spilt some beer, and it was quite a bit. And I remember looking over and seeing that, and then just turned my attention back to the band, kept watching the Gerrymanderers, and then probably like 2 minutes later, I heard all this like commotion and somebody screaming, and and I looked over and I didn't know what was going on, and I happened to see more like of this liquid on the floor, and I thought my first thought was somebody like because people were drinking quite a bit, and I thought somebody like spilled a big thing of beer or something, some kind of leak, because suddenly there was this like big puddle on the floor, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And while I was looking over, somebody who and I ended up realizing it was the one of the hosts of the party was she started to scream and started telling everybody to leave the house, and I thought something happened, like yeah, I don't know, maybe somebody like got into a fight or some stupid shit had happened, because it was all of a sudden she was like telling everybody to leave, and she's like, we gotta stop, and she like canceled. She started yelling at the band to stop playing, and everybody, she's like, we all need to leave. Everybody needs to leave the house. All of a sudden, and I didn't know what was going on, and then so the band stopped, and then I look over to the floor, and the whole like bottom of the whole floor was like filling up with all of this liquid, and then everyone realized it was all the whole place was filling up with oil, because one of the tankers, there were two tanks of oil in the basement, and one of the tanks had a leak, and it just erupted, evidently. And so literally the entire floor was like filling up with oil, and it was like all over the place, and it was just like, what the hell's going on here? So everybody like kind of panicked, and I was like, oh shit, this is dangerous. And I remember everybody evacuated out of the building, and then I remember we just tried to grab all of our equipment as quickly as possible, tried to do it safely. And I remember we went to the music space. Everybody grabbed all of their equipment that they had and just took it all up. And then a couple of us went back down to grab more stuff, and we just got it all and hauled it all out. And the whole show was canceled. And what it ended up happening was there was this giant oil leak, and the whole place filled up with oil. It was so weird, and it was dangerous, and everybody evacuated. the landlord for the building was called, but he was like at camp and found out that the oil delivery service had put the oil in the wrong container, and there was some kind of leak because of that. So the whole show was canceled. And then everybody had the people who lived in the house. There was like 5 or 6 people. Everybody like tried to figure out what the hell they were going to do, um, and trying to find a place to stay, open up the windows, whatever. And it was just crazy. So we ended up like it was kind of pandemonium there. And for a few minutes, I got a little worried. And then everybody got all their equipment out. Everybody was safe. Nobody got hurt. There was no fire or explosions, thankfully. So the show was canceled. The gerrymander was literally played like not even a full song. Totally freakish accident. And then we all like kind of hung out in the yard trying to figure out, if these guys were going to be okay, what they were going to do, and probably, advising them that it's probably not good to stay here tonight. So, and then that was that. And then we packed up all of our stuff in my truck, and then we left and we went out for a beer. Leo and I went to a brew pub afterwards because it was early. So, yeah, what a weird night. Totally weird. I felt bad for the other bands because they couldn't play. We were the only band locally, or I should say, we were the band that was coming the furthest away. The other bands were all like, as far as I know, were all like local. But yeah, a weird gig. And it was the other thing too. I found out was that this venue, this was like their launch party. This was their first show that they were having. So it's super weird, super weird. And then we just ended up leaving, and then that was that. So I just wanted to share this pretty memorable and pretty wacky story from last night. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Peace.